Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Process Podcast. Lotte, Liam, welcome to the podcast. How are we doing, guys?
Good afternoon, Edward.
All is good.
All is good?
Yeah.
How's your day been so far, Lotte?
Yeah, it's been really good. Same old like Wednesday, really. Had a nice walk into work. Had some PTs, training with the team, and then filming this afternoon with some movement library stuff and finishing some PTs, and here we are.
What is this movement library that you speak of?
Yeah, so it's basically all the exercise selections that we see on our What Up platform that we run through like our personal training or that you'll see in group classes, and we're just kind of making them look process programming vibed. Nice and sexy, and so us coaches are going to be filming all the movements that we prescribe through both the LPC as well as to our individual clients.
It's a lot of movements.
A lot of
We will never, ever achieve the goal of
yeah.
filming all the movements. There's always another movement. Basically, YouTube is an amazing resource for someone having a visual representation of what a video or a movement looks like. But there's also, unfortunately, a lot of inconsistencies, I should say. And so what we want to do is actually just create our own movement library that we refer to on all our programs. So we've made the initial start, and I think there is no end goal because like our movement library list that we've already created, which is probably 1% of the total exercise we can come up with, is already stupidly long.
Every time we go into like the filming studio with John, I'm like, there is definitely way more we can be doing,
Exactly.
But just keep chipping away, an hour every week. We'll eventually get our own movement library done.
Yes. All right, Liam, how's your day been so far?
Very similar to Lotte. It's been a great day. Programming in the morning. That's what Wednesday looks like. Generally some programming in the morning. I had no PTs this morning. Team training, lunch, bit of programming in the afternoon, and I went outside for a bit. The sun is now out in Hong Kong.
Yes.
Is it?
Just a bit though. It's not raining, which is a massive plus.
Fair.
And now we are 4:10 and we're doing a podcast.
When I was coaching Steph, the back door to the rubbish bin alley had swung open, and I could see the sun gleaming in. And I was like, what is that? I haven't seen that in so long.
Take PTs outside again.
I asked my client, I said, would you like to snatch in the rubbish bin alley? And she was like, no, thank you. I was like, okay, cool.
Fair enough.
Anyway.
How's your day been, Ed?
Oh, my day has been good. I've had, it's been a busy last couple of weeks. We're making some massive changes at Coast on the Process. And you guys know about this because I've been sitting down with all the staff and talking about them. But for those listening, we are making a quantum leap in the way that we pay our coaches. We are going to be moving away from commission-based salaries, and we're going to be moving towards fixed salaries. This is all in line with, a couple of objectives here is number one, sustainability for our team, making sure our coaches don't burn out. That is a very, very real thing in our industry. But more than anything else is also giving our coaches a chance to progress within their careers, take on more responsibilities outside of just coaching the one-on-one hour or the coaching hour. And we have just so many amazing opportunities for growth in the process programming now. And we're all super excited about it because it's so in line with our purpose and our mission of impacting people's lives. And now it's about recognizing within the team what skill sets do we have and what do we love doing, and empowering those people to do those things as well as continue to work on their craft as coaches. So lots of brainstorming, lots of thinking, so much excitement, a little bit of nerves and anxiety as well. So my morning has been spent in and around that stuff. And we made some good progressions there. What else to do? We had a good session with the team. We're de-louding this week, which is what we're talking about. Apparently we say de-louding now because I always put A before O when I spell it when I speed type, and that's just become a thing now.
Your spelling is horrific. I thought mine was bad, but yours is
Although
another level.
I got abused for my spelling today on my programming as well from Karan. I was like,
the problem is Karan actually. Because Karan
is the one that picks up all.
Yeah, he's just really good at picking out spelling mistakes. So before Karan was here, like no one gave me shit.
Yeah, it was all good.
The 5 of us that surviving
Can I
the
just say,
week?
I'm actually a good speller. But I like to be very fast with my typing, and
so you need typing lessons, not spelling lessons.
Probably need typing lessons, to be honest. And
not
I'm just
Grammarly, but typing.
We talked about this the other day, which is like attention to detail.
Yeah.
And some people have attention to detail for everything. Some people, i.e. myself, have attention to detail for a limited number of things. Like I think about this team. I think about Andrew, And like Andrew has like an attention to detail for a
Agreed.
lot of things. Like he's like the fine things matter. So we know when he was selling coffee, like everything from like the glass, how it was presented, how it was given to the client, the way he laid out his table. I'm like, wow, he's actually put a lot of thought into this. Like I would have just gotten a fucking park bench, stuck an espresso machine on it and just given whatever mug I had available and not thought about it, but it makes a difference, you know? So for me, like the thing that I'm really particular about is when I write training programs, but I geek out and I'm particular about what I'm actually writing, like the quality of the program itself, but the spelling I don't care about. Even like I love writing.
Because you're writing so many notes that you're just like so
but it's
excited
just
about
it
it.
is even like writing, right? So like if I'm feeling creative and I want to share something maybe on Instagram or I'm writing a blog post for the process programming, like I love the process of writing it. I think I'm quite good at it.
Actual content, right?
But once I've written it, all it would take is 1 minute to proofread it, and I'm always like, nah, just gonna get this out there. And then obviously I end up wasting a lot of time having to proofread it when Karan tells me there's 100 spelling mistakes and I have to go back and change it all. So
It's Quran, really.
it's basically Karan is a common denominator here. So anyway, had a good session with the team. After that, I had we just graduated Subterra, our affiliate. So they just finished their full mentorship process. They go live next week. Super exciting.
That's
so
awesome.
Been working with those guys. We kind of just said in our call today, like it's actually going to be quite sad not having these calls every Wednesday because we've kind of developed a bit of a bond and a relationship, and I'm super excited to see those guys go live. Had a meeting, then I coached, had another meeting, and straight into the podcast, and here we
Now
are.
you're here.
Great day.
So let's talk about what we're talking about today, guys, which is delouding, otherwise known as deloading to the rest of the world. The reason we're talking about delouding is because we are all deloading this week with the Live, Perform, Compete programs. And pretty much the entire team follows the Live, Perform, Compete program. And so everyone who's a part of the Live, Perform, Compete program around the world is going through a bit of a deload. And we put some questions out to our community. You put a great question up on the water cooler today, Lotte. It's like, what do you guys feel about, what do you guys think about deloading? How do you feel about deloading? And just generally speaking, it's probably the one time within our training cycles that we probably get the most amount of resistance to. General conversations, right? Why do I have to deload? What's the point in deloading? I don't feel like I need to deload. I've never deloaded in the past. And so I wanted to really invite you guys onto the podcast and understand or hear about your stories with I certainly have my own past relationships with deloading and definitely have evolved to where I am today, but we'd love to hear kind of the struggles and things that you guys have dealt with in the past. So I think let's start, maybe Liam, I'll ask you on this one, like what is deloading?
Well, deloading is where we're going to have a reduction in intensity and volume, planned or unplanned, within a training cycle.
And why would you deload?
We obviously deload because, the intention behind it is to let the body, mind recover and rest so that we can see those adaptations when we come back into the gym. And I think that's an important point to make, that we don't actually make our gains inside the gym.
When we're training.
Yeah, when we're training, we're actually making our gains when we're resting and we're recovering. That's why we focus so much on that recovery part, right?
So Tom, you mentioned two things, planned and unplanned there. What do we mean by planned deloads?
Well, planned is essentially what we're doing now with the LPC, where we have designed a training cycle, whether that be 6 weeks, 8 weeks, 12 weeks, and we're going to plan a specific period of time where we're going to have a reduction in volume, intensity or intensity. That might be 3 days, might be 2 days, might be 4 days, but generally speaking, we're going to probably deload for about a week.
And so what's an unplanned deload?
Well, unplanned would be where you're probably the individuals may be forced to take a deload, or maybe in some cases when we're running LPC and we're getting a lot of feedback where people are saying, oh, I'm actually feeling really, really sore. I'm feeling under recovered. I'm not sleeping properly. I don't really feel like much to give in the gym. Well, maybe that's the programmer like Ed who's probably going to say, well, actually, maybe we need to put in a kind of unplanned deload here for the next couple of days, let people rest and recover, and then come back at it.
Yeah, sometimes referred to as like a forced deload. So I think some context for where we're at in this cycle with the Live, Perform, Compete program. We laid out a 6-week cycle. At the end of the 6 weeks, so on week 6, we have quite a bit of testing. And the testing priorities this cycle were pretty much all strength tests. And so when we started the cycle, week 1, we had planned in week 4, we're going to have a deload for an entire week. Not an aggressive deload, but just probably like a 25 to 50% reduction in intensity and volume. And then for the last 2 weeks, we're going to pick it up again, and then we're going to test in week 6.
Nice.
So when we think back to the cycle we did just before this, we did another 6-week cycle. So we're kind of like, this is basically like an overall, it's a 12-week cycle of accumulation, right? It's kind of like pre-season, structural balance, addressing some like higher rep strength priorities. And what we did in the first 6 weeks was that we actually said we'll have a deload in week 5. I think you guys remember. We'll deload week 5 and then we'll test in week 6. And obviously this is the beauty of when you're actually doing your own program, is you kind of get that first-hand experience. And obviously me getting to watch all you guys, all of our members, and obviously seeing the data come through from our online subscribers, is that we got to week 4 last cycle and we were all smashed already. And we had all said together, we probably should have deloaded last week. And so that was a great example of, I guess, like a client-centric approach where you're learning from your last phase. Okay, next cycle, you know, the movements are changing, but the overall intention is more or less the same. Let's not make that same mistake again. Let's deload maybe a week earlier before people really feel the need to. And then we'll be able to, you know, go into our last 2 weeks of cycle.
I think that's another thing, like, you know, when I was taking my classes this week, I had a lot of people, you know, I'd put it out to the sessions and be like, okay, why are we deloading? What is deloading? And they automatically think, oh, because we're going to test. So we need to calm down and like reduce the intensity in our training because we're going to test. And I think it's also education behind that it's not necessarily, you know, from a coaching standpoint, when we write the LPC blocks, we don't always plan a deload right before a testing week. You know what I mean?
And it's so cool when clients say that. When I hear that, I'm like, yes, I love that you get it. So let's talk about like why we would deload, because some people might have been training for many, many years in the gym, following some form of program, and have never done a deload before and never felt the need to. There are other programs, let's say, like I can think of like Olympic lifting programs, powerlifting programs, squatting programs, where deloads are a little bit more frequent. So I think we should talk about, and we've dug into some one of our previous podcasts, but like, you know, when is deloading appropriate, and when might deloading not be something that needs to be included in a cycle? Liam, what are your thoughts?
I think when we're talking about like when we would have a planned deload, well, we in the strength world, we tend to use something called progressive overload. Right now, progressive overload simply means when you come into the gym every single week or every single day, we're just trying to lift a bit heavier than what you've done last week. We can use many formats. Some people will use RPE, so rate of perceived exertion. Some people like ourselves, we like to use, when it comes to strength, we'll use reps in reserve, which means when you come in the first couple of weeks of a programming, you're leaving a lot of reps in the tank so that we can progress that load over time with the same movement. So if you can imagine, well, obviously, if you're progressing the load every single week, you're going to get to a point where you can't physically progress that load if you've really been honouring those reps in reserve. So say week 1 starts with 5 reps in reserve. Week 5, you've got 0 reps in the tank. What do you do on week 6? You simply can't progress week by week. So that's where we're probably going to introduce a deload, right? We've maxed out, let's say, on a certain movement, dumbbell bench press, barbell bench press, whatever it is. We've maxed out. Now we're going to give your body some time to recover, because we know that we physically can't do hard work all the time. That leads to burnout, right?
And I think also when you're doing these progressions, you know, linear progressions or progressive overload with a number of different movements, is essentially what you're seeing over a 4 to 6 week period, is that every session, every week is getting a little bit harder. And so, you know, when it gets a little bit harder, and obviously this is a cost of adaptation, right? By adding more load to the bar or making an exercise more intense, you're creating more breakdown of the muscle tissues. You're asking more of your nervous system, which means the recovery resources needed to bounce back more every time it gets heavier. And so, you know, having something like a planned deload is essentially like allows you to have a bit of a break halfway through and allows you to just prolong the progression over a longer period of time. And also, like you said, like ensure that we stay away from that point where we cannot progress. Because you know, when you're grinding out a rep, fighting for that last rep, and you have 0 in the tank, that takes exponentially more out of you versus doing a repetition where you still have 2 to 3 in the tank.
I was just going to say, you know, I think we see a lot in our group classes. I think definitely our members here at Coastal have become a lot more individually savvy of where they sit with reps in reserve. But when Liam was going through the RIR, you can really see in the group classes the people who stick to those numbers. And they're also the people who are fully for the deload right now, you know, or we saw people that didn't necessarily stick to the reps in reserve, and maybe they were those ones grinding out the last few reps in the last 2 weeks before this, you know, and they felt like maybe they needed the deload a week or so earlier. So definitely when you're following your training program, listen to the coach, but also read the notes. And there is a specific intention of why those things come about, because a deload like this is going to be coming up. And you can really feel the benefits of the training program, that next week when we're out of the deload, you feel that progressive overload really paying off.
Yes. I mean, I've been writing the Live, Perform, Compete program now for, you know, probably over 10 years. And there was many of those years where I didn't prescribe deloads. And it was just, we would talk about a little bit about self-regulation, which we talk about a lot, which is essentially like, okay, rather than doing a deload, if you're feeling like you just need to pull back a little bit, just pull back a little bit. If you're feeling good, push a little bit. But what we're actually doing now by having these deloads in there, and the thing is, especially with group training, what we have to accept is that sometimes not everyone is actually going to need that deload. You may have had people that maybe only trained 3 days last week instead of 6. Maybe people have traveled. Maybe people had some unforeseen life circumstances happen the week before and ended up deloading anyway themselves weeks before, and then they have to do this deload week. But that's okay. I would much rather cater to the majority of people and know that there are going to be some people who don't need it, versus pushing everyone harder than they perhaps should do, and, you know, dealing with the consequences of what happens because of that. So what would happen, you know, in the past when we didn't have deloads, and we would of course encourage people to self-regulate, is that we would just end up with way more injuries, way more burnout, way more plateaus with training. And obviously as an organization now, like, that's the last thing we want. Like, we want to have 0 injuries, 0 burnout, and 0 plateaus. And this is when we kind of go back to our mission of sustainability, what we're always talking about. And it's what we really believe in at the Process program. Is like, if we put these deloads in, yes, it may not always be the most appropriate thing, or not everyone needs it, but even if you don't need it, it's going to prolong your training journey versus not doing it. So to be honest, in my eyes, that is actually a win for everyone. And, you know, and that's why it's so important for us to be super clear on who we're trying to deal with, or who we're trying to work with, and the message that we're trying to bring. So we're trying to do this, even if you're a high level athlete, we're trying to do this for a really long time, not just the next 3-6 months.
And even if you are someone that you feel like you don't need that deload, maybe you have been traveling. Like, I've got a client that I work with. He lives in Dubai, but he's a captain for Emirates. So he rarely gets deloads, because essentially his job takes him out the country, and he doesn't train for 3 to 4, maybe even sometimes 7 days. Well, I don't really need to plan that many deloads, because by default he's deloading himself. But if you are one of those people that maybe feel that you don't need a deload when you come into the gym, maybe you've only trained 3 days, whatever it is, you can still come into the gym and still have a great workout. Like, you don't have to smash yourself every single day. Like, today the intention is just going to be different. You might be working for range of motion, but you can still get a good sweat on and still feel that you're moving the needle forward, right?
Yeah, I think that's what a lot of people think, you know, when they think I'm going into a deload week. You know, what's the point of me going to a gym? You know, I'm not going to come out of the session feeling good, feeling like, you know, I've worked up a sweat. You know, a lot of people define a good session as the amount of like sweat they have rolling down around them, you know, that they're lying on the floor and they're really sore the next day. And I think, you know, with the deload, it's the education behind it, that we're still getting, you know, a very similar kind of stimulus. You're still doing very similar movement patterns, but the exercise selection is different. You know, for example, in our LPC, we would be doing a lot of heavy deadlifting on a Monday, and we still had deadlifting work. It was just in a single leg Romanian, you know. So it's the exercise selection. You'll see the rep scheme go up and then the loads come down, and it's a little bit more focus on technique, that kind of work. But I think a lot of people expect to come in a deload session and just be like, oh, easy breezy,
What's the point?
Yeah, what's the point? But it's understanding that you're still getting, you know, adaptation and the same response from it, but in just a slightly lower intensity, and it's going to benefit you for the next training week. I definitely used to be very guilty of that myself. Just like, if I'm not absolutely smashing myself, then, you know, I haven't really worked out at the gym. And you'll actually find some people finish a deload week feeling more sore, because they've actually recruited like certain movements that, or muscle groups that they're not used to, you know, and they've really build up that intensity in that isolated setting.
Yeah, I think there's definitely an art to writing deloads. I definitely was guilty of adhering to the principles of deloading a little bit too strictly, which is like, I have to make this a reduction in intensity. I have to make this a reduction in volume. And yes, there are times when the reduction or the deload needs to be a bit more aggressive, where sometimes the deload week might be like, don't come into the gym and just like go on some walks in the sunshine.
Yeah.
But, you know, generally speaking, when we're doing more frequent deloads, which is what we do, which is kind of like every 3 to 4 weeks, the deloads don't need to be as aggressive, and we can actually still have fun. And like you said, still get better, still get fitter, still move the needle towards the goals on a deload. And so, you know, I think now I'm getting a much better handle of how to program them, still make them fun, still make them intentional, still feel like people are progressing. But like you said, the main things, like right now, when you have a training cycle where you've got really clear priorities of what you're trying to progress. So right now we're trying to do, we're doing deadlifting, we've got some heavyish back squats, what else? We've got snatch, power snatch 2 rep max. It's really those things which we're progressively overloading each week. Those are the things we're trying to pull back on. Yeah, you're not going to see progressions there, but you can see variations of it. But all the other things, maybe they don't necessarily need to be pulled back that much.
But it's you know, it's not like you're going to come into the gym and for that one day you're going to get worse at snatching, you know, or you're just going to still maintain a plateau at snatching. I actually think in a deload, because the focus is no longer kind of on the weights that you're lifting or anything like that, it's focusing on the technique and the positions. And like you said on Monday, I still got better at snatching today because your focus is different. You're still moving, as Liam said, that needle a little bit further every day. It's just the intention and the focus behind the session is that little bit different.
Yeah, I agree. It's sometimes you feel that the stress is off, the pressure is off to have to progress today, especially in terms of loads or repetitions, and just like, okay, this is a chance for me just to explore, play, have a bit of fun.
Yeah.
And yeah, totally agree. Okay, so I think we're kind of edging towards this, which is like what, Lotte, you just kind of alluded to this a little bit, but what is your current relationship with deloading? So when you see deload week, when everyone's talking about deload week, when I say everyone, I'm basically mean me.
Ed's like, yes,
like,
it's deload week, everyone.
how do you feel? Like, what's your genuine relationship with deloading at the moment? Lotte.
Oh, me first. At the moment, so I think at the moment I'm all for a deload. I support the deload purely because I understand it a lot more from a coach's perspective and the programmer perspective. I have done a lot of work on both my mindset in and outside the gym, my self-awareness in and outside the gym, and therefore my understanding of deload weeks has elevated a lot more. So I'm all for them.
No resistance.
It's not no resistance. So I actually had this conversation with another one of our coaches, and it's not that I have resistance in the gym with the deload week. I'll embrace it 100%, but I actually find myself a little bit more active outside. So things like maybe I'll walk that extra little bit more to work, or, you know, I'll go on a walk after work. So it's not necessarily like I don't feel like I'm doing enough. I actually just find I'm maybe a little bit more active outside, but my body feels really good in the gym in the deload, because again, my intentions in training is just different. And like Liam said, you've taken that pressure off yourself in the deload week. So right now I'm good. I have a really good relationship with deloads. I've been very guilty in the past and very resistant in the past. I think that comes from the lack of, again, self-awareness of why I train and what my relationship with the gym. I now see my training as from like a lot more of like a longevity standpoint, and I appreciate my body a lot more in the training, and I want to see sustainable training. Before, I know that if I was having maybe a stressful time outside the gym, I would use the gym as like my stress release, and I just have to hit it hard every single day. So if someone told me to deload, it's like, well, this is my time, this is my hour that I just need to let everything out. Like if I'm not lying in a pool of sweat, then I haven't done anything. Like, did I really train? And it's been a good few years coming back and forth, and I still have those little itches every now and then, but it comes back to my why and why I train, and I want to see sustainability in it and train for longevity, and I want my body to feel good. And I know that if I have stress outside, training hard is the last thing I should be doing right now.
What were some of the catalysts that led to the change? Like, what made you start thinking about changing your mindset from like, you know, having this being your hour to really stress and go hard and this is how I define a successful workout to now, you know, thinking about sustainability more and not, you know, using the hardness or challenge of a workout to determine its goodness?
It came from my awareness and stress management outside the gym first. My realization that different areas of my life I needed to maybe change or alter or reflect on and have a little bit more self-compassion with. I think just as I kind of educated myself on every area outside, this also kind of came up at the same point. I've just seen that across the board, 100%.
Nice.
Yeah.
So basically, like, the more self-aware you became,
yeah, correct,
the more you were able to, connect the dots between the impact that life outside the gym was having on your performance in the gym, but also what you did in the gym and how that would impact life outside of it.
Like just a massive increase in self-awareness across the board, and asking myself why I was doing things, not just training, you know, out in anything, emotional, like relationships, everything like that. I think it's just the growth that I've had outside has therefore reflected inside, and I've just probably taken a little bit more of a step back to why I train, and that's kind of reflected in my training.
Nice.
Yeah.
Mr. Carmichael, what's your relationship with deloading, my friend?
I feel like I've got a pretty good relationship with deloading.
I'd say you've always, ever since I've known you,
Yeah.
you've had a really good relationship with deloading.
I mean, I do like to, like, I understand the importance of rest and recovery. That's something I've always, like, really valued. And understanding, like, we kicked this podcast off, understanding, like, you're not actually making your gains in the gym. Once I understood that, well, I'm like, well, deload, I can rest a bit more. I'm going to see those gains. I'm going to feel better, more mental clarity. Like, I just feel better. And in the past, like, it's definitely been like when I've heard the word deload, a reduction in volume, a reduction in intensity, I'm like, oh shit, well, I'm going to lose all my gains. Oh no. But, like, the more experience you get, you understand, even if you don't come to the gym for a week, you're not going to lose your gains. In previous Liam, he would have thought, oh shit, I'm going to lose all my gains. But again, similar to Lotte, it's just understanding your why and why do you train. Like, I'm sure that we can all agree that we want to be doing this for the next 30 years. So if we all want to be doing this for the next 30 years, we've got to understand the principle of rest and recovery and adaptation. Like, developing that good relationship, not even with a deload, but just rest in general. Like, understanding what stressors are. Obviously, we've got physical, we've got emotional, we've got chemical. Understand what those stressors are, and understand that we can't stress ourselves out all the time.
Yeah.
We need to rest, recover, and then adapt. So once you understand that, it's great. And like we've been doing this week, we've all been having fun. It's an opportunity to maybe go off script a little bit, change up the movements, or do some more bodybuilding, whatever it may be. Have some fun. It's not like that, like we said before, that pressure's off. You're not having to progressively overload your back squat. You don't have to add that extra 5 pounds. Or maybe doing some split squats. All good.
Yeah.
What are some of the signs that you guys both see when you know that maybe you are pushing that needle just a bit too much? Like, stress management is maybe not quite there. Yeah. Do you guys see something in particular that may shoulder, sleep? What you guys tell me?
For me, like, sleep is always the constant for me. Because I'm not a great sleeper anyway. Haven't been for a really, really long time. I've done a lot to improve my quality of sleep, and I have to be super regimented to have consistently good sleep. But the moment I'm overreaching or under recovering, whichever way you want to look at it, sleep quality generally deteriorates. So, and that's generally speaking not the ability to fall asleep, but it's a lot more restless throughout the night and then waking up feeling tired. That's number one. It pretty much is always consistent when I know that I need to probably pull back a little bit. And then the second one is just joint pain. And like the joint pain that I get is in all of the sites that I've had major operations, which is most joints in the body, but in particular, my knees will feel it the most. That's that right now in this season of life. It seems like my knees are my biggest kind of like red flags, my warning signals more than anything else. What about you?
For me, I'd say it's sleep. But I think that's just a combination. Is like we talked about. If you're pushing the needle forward in all areas in your life, like, okay, yeah, you're coming to the gym, but you've got the other 23 hours, like we keep talking about. I feel like my sleep starts to deteriorate. It feels like I I was very restless. I feel my digestion's not the best.
Yes, I should add that to my list
so
as
like
well.
the Bristol stool charts all over the place. And then just general mood. I feel like I get a lot more irritated and a bit of brain fog. That would be some signals that I start to see.
I
You
agree.
you get a spot as well, do you not? I get an ulcer. Is it an
Oh,
ulcer?
ulcers. Yeah, ulcers.
ulcers, yeah.
Ulcers. I used to get them a lot as like when I was in school, and now when I think back to those days, I can always correlate a stressful time or a stressful period as to why I got it.
Yeah.
But now I'll always get an ulcer, almost kind of like, almost 100% of the time.
Yeah. I'm gonna sound like an echo. My sleep's not great when I have those signs. Definitely like inflammation in my body. My shoulder will play up, and specifically my knee as well. And then
You got a sore knee today, no?
yeah, that's because I twisted in a clean.
Mm-hmm. Just as well you're deloading.
Yeah.
Deloading.
Definitely digestion's a little bit off. I know that my mood, I'm very like self-critical. But the other thing is I get that weird rash. Do you remember me telling you about it?
Yeah.
I get like weird, is that like hives or something? I look at Ed because I show him every time I have it. But I just know that's when my body is just a little bit stressed out, and usually it's something's not quite right.
It's so interesting that all our bodies respond so differently. And what I'll say is that, sometimes it's not always the same signals to me. Sometimes it's joint pain, sometimes it's sleep, sometimes it's gut stress, sometimes it's a rash, sometimes it's like an eczema, sometimes it's blocked ears, sometimes it's an itchy throat. Like it just changes all the time. But again, like having, I'm sure we'll talk about this at some point, a system of cultivating that daily check and that self-awareness to ask yourself, okay, how am I feeling? How am I doing? I kind of want to go back to like previous relationships with deloading, because listening to you guys talk about constantly talking about why made me think a lot about my own why and how that's evolved and changed. And certainly like when I hired a coach in the past, so I was paying someone for my training, and my goal was athletic performance. It was to make it to a certain point within the CrossFit season and performed well. That's when I had a really bad relationship with deloading. Because I think part of it was knowing that I was paying for a service which was designed to get me better. And I felt like then I was paying for a service which this week wasn't getting me better. So the actual issue was not understanding the importance of the deload and how that actually feeds into the overall goal of making me a better athlete. So that was number one. But I also do think, once my goals changed from not chasing athletic performance and now being about more sustainability and wanting to do this for a long time, and like, rewarding myself and being happy when I feel good. That's something that's such a massive marker to me. Like feeling good and not being in pain is so much more important to me now than how much I can bench press and how much I can squat. And so that is just an evolution as well that has come with a changing of goals for sure. Also like being a part of writing my own programs. Like I now, because I'm writing the program and I'm following my program essentially, is like I understand the intention so much more. I can see how this fits in with everything. I can see how it's a part of a bigger picture. And so I just naturally, for me, have so much more buy-in to the deload.
Did you ever have that conversation with your coach? Like
totally. Poor bastard had to hear me having the same fucking complaints every deload phase. So Kyle, if you're listening, I'm not sure if you are, but like I'm sorry for all that torment. But it would basically, he would write a very good deload session that was totally appropriate for what I needed. And to be honest, I'd feel like shit. Like clearly I probably should have deloaded actually like 6 weeks before that, but I didn't because I probably just ignored it. And so, my language would be a lot of like, I don't feel like I need this deload. Why is the volume so low? I could have gone heavier here. And, that was like a constant for probably like 2 to 3 years.
But
now,
really is that 1 week going to make that
no,
much
totally.
difference,
Now I look back at it, I'm like, you're an idiot. And it's like, it's no surprise that those years as well. It was also like, I was very inflamed. I had a lot of injuries. I wasn't healthy for sure. Like my strength plateaued but like I'm much stronger now than I was then. And it's not because of the training. It was my own application to the training program. And so, now when I'm working with clients or we have people in our community who have that resistance to deloading, I totally resonate. Like I can totally understand where they're coming from. And that's why I want to do a better job, or I want us to do a better job at educating those people on the intention and why it's so important. And, like every time we deload, we put posts out all over social media talking about we're deloading. Here's why we're deloading. Here's our story with deloading, in the hope that, people will start to recognize that this is an important part of the process.
I even saw someone write I need to give them credit, and I forgot who it was, on their daily check-ins. And they were thinking, oh, I don't really need this deload. And then they looked at their daily check-ins from last week to this week, and they were like, oh my God, you know what? I need it. And it was great. And just seeing that light bulb. Yeah,
moment.
It was good.
Okay, let's talk about daily check-ins. We've mentioned this a couple of times. Like, Lotte, what do we mean by daily check-ins?
Right. So here at the Process Program, we've started doing on our What Up system a daily check-in for each of our subscribers, specifically like our LPC members. I know most of us do it for our PT clients.
Actually,
as well.
all of our programs.
All our programs.
All our programs.
All of our programs.
I stand corrected.
Everyone.
Apologies. Basically, we ask you 5 questions, and you rate them from 0 to 5. And it's basically just we're holding everyone accountable for just having that little bit of self-love in the morning or before you train, preferably before you train, of how you're feeling both mentally, physically, and just to give you a total score at the end of the day and then at the end of the week.
So what are the 4 questions?
We have physical readiness, right?
Yep.
Mental readiness.
Mood.
Was it sleep?
Stress management.
Stress management, and then the total score.
Total score. So basically 1 to 5 for
1 to
each of
5.
them. 5 is higher. 5 is better, essentially. And then you total them up at the end of each day and you have a score out of 20.
And I think it's really made people think, okay, for a second, how am I feeling? You know,
It's honestly, I remember myself and Tammy talking about this for a while. And actually we started, this is all like our commitment to like raising awareness within our subscribers. Creating more awareness around like mental health, mood, everything outside of the training space, more so than the training space. Our community is really damn good at training. They don't need to do that any better. So we started with like a Sunday reflections where we were trying to encourage our community to kind of just like reflect on the week and talk about wins, losses, how they're feeling, how there's their food been, etc., etc. Didn't get a whole amount of buy-in. And we actually had one of our subscribers, Moaz, say like, this is so cool, but we should have this every day.
Yeah.
And then I was trying to think for so long, how can we incorporate this to be every day? It's going to be messy. I don't know how it's going to look. I don't know. It's going to be too much work. How can we do it? Found a way to do it, and it has been so powerful.
yeah.
I mean, for me personally, like I do something similar at the end of every day, but having to do it before and having this rating system has been awesome for me. You know, just seeing that total score out of 20 and then seeing the trends from day to day, that's been the really powerful part. But then also as a coach checking in on our subscribers, seeing their results, like I'm smiling so much just thinking about it now, because I feel like I have so much more to offer now as a coach now that I can see that, you know, helping people pick up positive and negative trends, checking in with people if I'm seeing a bad score, being like, if I'm seeing someone's mood is 1 out of 5, I'm like, mate, you okay? Like, let me know if I can help with anything. And then already so quickly, it's without even us as coaches having to step in and say something, it's cultivating much higher levels of self-awareness, because people are starting to see 100%. Their own scores, and they're also seeing other people's scores. So like you could do your own score. I've found this myself. Is like I entered my own score. My score pops as leaderboard. I'm like, holy shit, I am low compared to everyone else. So I thought I was good. And then suddenly in the context of everyone else, I'm like, I'm actually not good. Okay, maybe I need to pull back a bit.
But I think also, you know, it's actually been really nice to see that, in a way, it's not really about how everyone else is feeling at the end of the day. It's you. But also, it's really nice to see in our community that if someone has seen someone else with another low score potentially in the mood, they're actually reaching out, and it's creating that sense of community that everyone else cares, that even if they don't know you or they do train with you in the same class, you know, maybe notice you're a little bit down today, and you know that you check your scores and everyone can check in with each other. It's actually really sweet.
Yeah, and when I see a 20, when someone puts a 20 out of 20,
yes,
I'm like,
having
fuck
a great
yeah.
Fire.
You
Absolutely
fucking
fire.
PR
so happy
today.
for you.
Tammy actually had a 20 out of 20 today. I saw that.
On a deload week.
On a deload, yeah. Liam.
That's why we needed a deload to
Exactly.
have
Yeah,
that
there we
20.
go.
Exactly.
I mean, I love the concept. I think what's really been good about it is that we've managed to put it into WADUP so that we can track it and see that graph. I think that was super important because people can now start to pick up the trends, right? Maybe our female population, they're starting to pick up that trend over a month. Well, in 2 weeks of the month, I'm not feeling so great. Or why are you not feeling so great? Well, then maybe it's your menstrual cycle. And that's us as coaches to step in and offer that education, which I think has been really cool. And like you said, it's just as simply all we're trying to do is cultivate more awareness within our community. And it allows us to create bigger bonds with the person. Like we now know we can start to pick up trends, and then it's easier for us to step in and again offer a solution to the problem.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point you brought up there, especially with like the women understanding that, you know, potentially 2 weeks out of the month, they're not going to feel great in training and outside of training. And also, even as coaches, when we see that and we reach out and they're like, yeah, you know, I just have my period and this, that, and the other. It's like, well, no, it's not that, you know, and we can help educate them. And actually, you know, potentially, if we're not even in a deload week, this is how we can adjust today's training program to fit how you're feeling and how your body is feeling. Because yeah, the LPC says everything like this, but every female's in a completely different week of their cycle, and just being able to understand that if you are in certain weeks of your cycle, that you don't need to be pushing, and in a way you shouldn't be, because your body's not meant to be pushing for that adaptation at the moment. It's almost not the right
maintenance
thing to do.
mode. Yeah,
Correct.
And essentially that's us getting into the whole conversation of self-regulation. Like, of course, we have our planned deloads, but we also offer that tool for our clients is self-regulate. What is self-regulation? Oh, it's empowering the client to then make a change of the session based on how they're feeling. So they're now getting this chart, or they're tracking their trends. Maybe they're getting a total score of 12. Well, they now know that a 12 is probably not the best. It's test week. Should I be testing? Maybe not. Well, we're going to give you more tools. Maybe just do one heavy set, one moderate set. And this is where we're just constantly giving the awareness to our clients, right?
and I think a very important supporting mechanism to that is, as coaches, to be celebrating when people are making the appropriate changes. You know, most, especially in the CrossFit space, most people punish people for scaling or pulling back intensity because it's a sign of weakness, or you're not mentally tough enough that you shouldn't be, you know. And so making sure that the language, if this is something you're listening to this and you're within a coaching organization, or you're a member of a community where maybe you're noticing that is part of the culture where, you know, adjusting and potentially scaling back is not approved of, you know, you need to understand that, like, maybe there's more education needs to be a part of that, or integrated in it, more self-awareness needs to be raised. But I would just say, you know, if you're listening to this, you're not a part of the process program community, you know, a really easy thing to do, maybe you're not into journaling, maybe that's not your thing, maybe you're just kind of understanding this whole concept of self-regulation or creating self-awareness and how it's important. A really easy way to do this is just have that scoring system. Ask yourself those 4 questions, write it down in your training journal every day, however you track your progress, give yourself a score of 20, and just have a look at your scores every day. Are they trending positively, or are they trending negatively? And if so, make those appropriate adjustments.
Yeah.
Team, this has been an absolute pleasure. Thank you for joining me.
As always.
Enjoy the rest of your D-Loud week.
Will do.
And we will see you here next week.
See
Thanks,
ya.
guys. Cheers.